Welcome everyone, I'm Shadowrider, and this is my first real lore video. Our journey will start us in the Vale. I'll be dividing this video into several parts. Firstly, I will be discussing the basic information about the Vale. Then I will go into depth analyzing each of the Lords Declarant, whereafter I will spend some time discussing other minor points I find it necessary to discuss. If you only care about the conclusion of this video, go to this timestamp. You can find it on screen, in the description and in the comments. This is when I'll be showing the complete picture of the politics in the Vale. If you want to spend only 1 minute on my video, at least watch this. This is the most important part. This will also be my first video for my series on the Tourney, the upcoming plot for Elaine Stone. This series will contain lore videos, prophecy videos and writing videos. The reason I'm calling this series the Tourney is because there's a tourney coming up in the Vale. Who could have guessed? That will probably be the central plot within the first 3 or so Elaine chapters. This will be my way of organizing everything to make sure my content is cohesive and things are organized into graspable categories. But it also allows me to, when writing, restructure the entire story quite easily by moving these big events around and having everything surrounding said big events. Of course, not everything will be able to have such big events, but most characters do, and that allows me to do this easy way of organizing the story. Oh, and one more thing before the video starts. This video will contain spoilers for the Vale, including some parts of the Elaine sample chapter. If you haven't read the books, stop watching right now and read them. If you don't want things spoiled, don't watch this video. Having had all that out of the way, I hope you enjoy. So let's start with the very basics. The Vale is a region in Westeros. Before the Andal invasion it was ruled by a score of First Men Kings, until, of course, the Andals invaded in the Vale and conquered the place. The first Arryn was one of these Andals, making his the oldest Andal house, of the major houses at least. For 6,000 years, the Vale was never conquered. Even in Aegon's conquest, where the rule of the Arryns ended, the Vale was not defeated. Before Aegon's conquest, the Vale was one of the 7 kingdoms of Westeros. It spanned from the Bight to the Blackwater Bay, from the narrow sea to the mountains of the moon. The Vale is mostly mountains, yet it holds farms rivaling even Highgarden. The pumpkins of the Vale are known to be the best in the world. Because of these huge mountain ranges, the Vale is also extremely well defended, and they have a near impregnable castle, the Eyrie. After Aegon's conquest, the Arryns had surrendered the land south of the Bay of Crabs to make place for the Crown lands. The Arryns also gained a new title, Wardens of the East. The Vale men are mostly loyal to the faith of the Seven, and they are known for their honor. Knights of the Vale consider themselves the finest of the 7 kingdoms. Yet there are some who have rejected the reign of the Eyrie, known as the Mountain Clans. These are first men, and they hold the ancient beliefs of the old gods. They are known for raging and pillaging the Vale, and are a certain threat to anyone traveling the high road. Then there are third people, the Sistermen. These originate from the 3 sisters, and are said to have webs between their fingers and their toes. This is known as the Mark, and we see that this rumor is actually true, with, for example, Lord Godric Borrell. The Vale remained loyal to the Targaryens till the rule of Aerys II, the Mad King. The Lord Paramount at the time was Jon Arryn, and he was fostering 2 boys, Eddard Stark and Robert Baratheon. Aerys II was fearful of the 2 boys, and demanded they be handed over to him. Jon Arryn refused, and this sparked Robert's rebellion. More on that in another video. Long story short, Robert Baratheon takes the throne and appoints Jon Arryn as his hand. Jon Arryn marries Lysa Tully and fathers a single son, Robert Arryn, also known as Sweet Robin. Jon Arryn is an above average hand, until he discovers that Robert's 3 children weren't actually his, probably thanks to Stannis. Before things get out of hand, Jon Arryn is murdered by his own wife of all people. Even though the crown knows only ignorance of her crimes, Lysa Arryn flees back to the Vale. That is where the first book starts. Robert Baratheon is in search of a new hand, and Lysa Arryn is hiding in the Vale with her son, Sweet Robin. He is 6 years old, weak and sickly. He is spoiled and known to cry when his dolls are taken away. By all accounts, he is prone to die, and if he were ever to be an effective leader, he needs to be taken away from his mother. It is not a surprise that Jon Arryn tried to arrange that he be taken as a ward on Dragonstone. This was one of the biggest reasons Lysa murdered him. She didn't want to lose her child. To everyone's shock, Sweet Robin was not appointed Warden of the East. Jaime Lannister was. This causes Lysa to appoint Sweet Robin as the true Warden of the East, a first sign of rebellion. In A Game of Thrones, the first book, Catelyn Stark takes Tyrion Lannister as a prisoner and rides him to the Eyrie, where we meet the Arryns for the first time. Tyrion manages to achieve a trial by combat and wins said trial. Being released, he travels high roads towards the Riverlands and promptly gets ambushed by mountain clansmen. He takes his clansmen to be his personal guard and arms them with weapons. This causes the clansmen to be a lot more open and a lot more violent. Later, in the War of the Five Kings, Lysa refuses to aid any of the Five Kings. Lysa does call her banners, though she refuses to send them. Now we're getting to the relevant parts. But first, Petyr Baelish. There is a lot to tell and more to speculate about him, but this is not the time for that. If you want some more things on Petyr Baelish, click on the iCard above. We'll be keeping it short. Petyr Baelish is from a small house in the Fingers, and they hold only a small unnamed tower. They rule a score of peasants, but during the 5th Blackfire Rebellion, his father became good friends with Hosta Tully. As a gift, Hosta Tully fostered his son, Petyr Baelish, at Riverrun. Petyr Baelish was but a young boy, and he fell in love with Catelyn Tully. This love was returned, though not by Catelyn, but by her sister, Lysa Tully. Upon the betrothal of Catelyn Tully to Brandon Stark, Petyr challenged him to a duel and lost. Petyr was only 15 and Brandon Stark was over 20. After the duel, Petyr was to return to the Fingers in disgrace, and he was possibly raped. Several years later, Robert's rebellion was won and Lysa was married to Jon Arryn. Upon her request, Baelish was appointed to a minor sinecure in customs. There, he distinguished himself by making near 3 times as much as other collectors. This brought him to King's Landing, and within 3 years he was made Master of Coin. He kept the treasury during the rest of Robert's reign, and on this position he made several suspicious moves, chief among them convincing Lysa to murder her husband, because yes, that was his doing. In A Clash of Kings, he journeys to the Reach to convince the Tyrells to join the Lannisters. After the Battle of the Blackwater, a battle won partly due to his diplomatic skill, he was rewarded Harrenhal, and he was named Lord Paramount of the Trident. He reappears after the Purple Wedding, possibly orchestrated by him and Olenna Tyrell, where Sansa flees with him to the Vale. He suggests Sansa name herself Elaine Stone, after his mother's name, and as a niece of Littlefinger's. He takes her to the Eyrie, where she witnesses the wedding of Petyr and Lysa, and later her murder by Petyr. This is where things really start to spice up. After Lysa's death, Petyr rules the Vale as Lord Protector in the name of Sweet Robin. Not everyone is too pleased with this, though. Not many appreciated their lady getting murdered, and even less her being replaced by an up-jumped minor lordling. One of these is Nestor Royce, High Steward of the Vale. He is seemingly pleased, though, when Littlefinger grants him the Gates of the Moon. We are going to discuss him and all his possible schemes in the next video. 6 other minor lords formed the Lords Declarant. They marched to the Eyrie and demanded to be informed about their lady's murder. Littlefinger frames Marillion, the singer, and he convinces Sansa to go along with the scheme. Littlefinger is granted a single year of rule before he has to stand down. With winter coming, Littlefinger descends from the Eyrie to the Gates of the Moon. That is where the Winds of Winter starts. Now that we're all reminded of the main story of the Vale thus far, let's talk characters. To be precise, we'll be talking about characters outside of the Gates of the Moon, aka the external politics. To start, let's talk about the Lords Declarant. Who and what are they? There are 6 of them, though only 4 are lords. We have Lord Bronzejohn Royce, Lady Anya Wainwood, Lord Gilwood Hunter, Lord Horton Redfoot, Lord Benedar Belmore, and Sir Simon Templeton. They came together at Runestone and later marched their armies to the Gates of the Moon, the access point to the Eyrie. There they sieged the Eyrie and came to parley with Littlefinger. In this parley they agreed to give Littlefinger a single year of rule, as stated above, and they returned their armies home. Now to get a bit more specific about each of the Lords Declarants, let's start with Bronzejohn Royce. He is head of the Royces of Runestone. He was a great Tourney knight, which might become relevant, and he was listed as a possible ally to Ned Stark at his coup. He was present in King's Landing at the time, and he was one of the lords who fled upon the death of Robert Baratheon. His son, Robar Royce, supported Renly Baratheon in the War of the Five Kings, and even became one of his Rainbow Guard, though Bronzejohn Royce wanted Lysa to support Robb Stark. At the death of Lys Arryn, he calls together the other Lords Declarant and functions as their leader of sorts. After they agreed to allow Littlefinger a single year in power, he departed with anger and publicly vowed that he'd remove Littlefinger from his office. To ensure the loyalty of the other Lords Declarants, Bronzejohn holds a tourney to Knight Harold Hardane, also known as Harry the Heir. He also marries his daughter, Isella, to Michael Redford. Littlefinger tells Sansa that he's the most dangerous of the Lord Declarants, though, of course, this is Littlefinger, which makes this statement probably false. Then Lady Anya Wainwood. She is a cunning old woman, and Littlefinger states he hopes she'd die within the year, allowing him to continue his rule. From what we've seen, this is extremely unlikely, though. She is rather healthy for her age. She holds her niece, Harry the Heir, as her ward, making her the most powerful player in the Vale if Sweet Robin were to die. She is most likely the actual biggest threat to Littlefinger of all of the Lords Declarant, though she does have several weaknesses. Firstly, she has a debt. Normally this wouldn't be a problem, but the Iron Bank of Bravos has recently called back all their debts. This means that any houses who lend money from the Iron Bank would be in huge trouble. We don't know for sure who her creditor is, but we do know that Littlefinger has bought out all their debts in exchange for a betrothal between Harry the Heir and Elaine Stone. This means that Littlefinger could still hold power over her, especially if the betrothal doesn't come to pass. Secondly, a lot of her power derives from the fact that Harry the Heir is her ward. As her ward, she holds substantial power over him. But if the status could be removed, this power would vanish. If, say, Littlefinger manages to turn Harry the Heir into his ward, he would control the future of the Vale. Thirdly, her son is, according to Littlefinger, a lot more willing to surrender to his rule. If he somehow could remove her from the picture, he would probably have the support of the Wainwoods. This is an interesting statement, and an interesting prospect, though I don't expect this will come to pass. Still, none of these weaknesses change the fact that Anya Wainwood is a powerful lord. If she were to oppose Littlefinger, many would follow. Littlefinger still has to find a way to deal with her, and unless he's planning on murdering her, her history doesn't present any other possibilities. But Anya Wainwood does present an interesting opportunity for Sansa. If Sansa were to escape, she'd have 3 quick options for escaping the Vale. Of course, I'm not saying these are her only options, but these are her easiest. Her first option is to head west by the high road, but we know that's snowed in and unpassable and covered in well-armed clansmen. She might go there, but I expect it to be unlikely. Her third option is to head north and travel to Sea by Heart's home, and we'll get back to the core base later, but for now let's assume this is unlikely. Then her second option, the only option that remains, is heading east to Iron-Oaks. And guess who's Lady of Iron-Oaks? Exactly, Anya Wainwood. If somehow Sansa could get Anya to support her escape, it would probably be the safest escape she could possibly have. Still, we have no indication that this is to happen, so maybe. Who knows? Then there is something else interesting about the Wainwoods. If all the Stark children were to die, the next in rule to Earl Winterfell and the entire North would officially be the Wainwoods. This is because Ned Stark's grandfather's sister married to Benedict Royce. They got 3 children, and the eldest of which married to the Wainwoods. So if all were to go wrong, they would have a claim upon the entirety of the north. To be honest, I really don't expect this to happen, but it's an interesting fact to keep in mind. The third of the Lords Declarant is Gilwood Hunter. He is surely an interesting character, and I'd love to see what George R. R. Martin does with him. We know that his father, Ian Hunter, died rather suspiciously, which has led a lot of people in Westeros to conclude he murdered his own father. These people include his two brothers, Harlan and Eustace Hunter. Still, if he actually murdered him is unclear. We do not know for sure, and we cannot know for certain, but we do have some bits of information. Littlefinger tells Sansa that it was Harlan who killed their father. This seems rather off though, because unless he plans on murdering his father and both of his brothers, he doesn't stand to gain anything here, especially because his father was at least 80 years old. Why wouldn't he first murder his brothers and hope for his father to die, then murder his father first? Besides that, we don't know if any of the Hunter brothers have heirs, but that seems rather likely if their father was past 80, which would make them somewhere around 60. If Harlan really wanted Longbow Hall, he'd need to murder his brothers and their sons and probably their sons, and even their daughters would have better claims than him, possibly including Janice Hunter, who married the future heir of the Trident. It's quite possible that if Harlan really wanted the Hunter seat, he'd also need to kill Edwin Frey. And even if he does all that, he is probably somewhere in his 60s and prone to die. Is it really worth it to go through all that trouble simply for a few years on a minor seat? Well, maybe, but I don't think so, especially for the honorable Valeman. I think the most likely possibility is that Littlefinger is lying here. The question is, why? Why would Littlefinger lie here? Well, the simple answer is that Littlefinger wants to give a fake sort of reassurance to Sansa. His true goals will be a video for another time, but it seems Littlefinger won't be able to beat the Lords Declarant. Not in the way he presents, at least. This would be part of the greater lie, giving him a reason why he could possibly defeat the Lord Declarant, but this lie also does another thing. It gives Sansa a sense of disdain for Harlan and a sense of pity for Lord Gilwood Hunter. If Gilwood is truly framed, then Sansa would have pity for him and be more likely to be kind to him, and if Harlan is truly a kinslayer, then Sansa would have a form of hate and distrust towards him. We as the audience know that this is probably a lie, but Sansa doesn't know this, and thus she will probably act as if this were true. These setup biases probably won't have any effect on the story. I don't expect Sansa will meet with either of them to a meaningful capacity, but who knows? Maybe one of them comes to the tourney and this bias will play a role in what happens. Then the question of course returns to Littlefinger. Why would Littlefinger want to plant this bias? Does Littlefinger know Gil would have something he wants Sansa to trust, or does Littlefinger know Harlan has something he wants Sansa to mistrust? Who knows? Or maybe it was all unplanned that happened, and it could turn to his favor, it could turn against him, or nothing could happen of it. All we can do is wait and see and speculate. Okay, I promise the next ones will be a lot shorter. The fourth Lord Declarant is Horton Redford. When making his statements at the Eyrie, he rose with the basket because he was too old to make the climb. Littlefinger predicted he'd die within a year, and I'm somewhat inclined to believe him. He has 4 sons, Jasper, Creighton, John, and Michael, born in that order, so if he were to die, Jasper is to follow him. We do not know what Allegiant Chapter would hold upon his father's death. We do know that Michael Redford, who was a squire to Linda Corbray, we'll get back to it, is married to Isella Royce, seemingly to seal the alliance within the Lords Declarant. I think it would be really wishful thinking to think that Jasper would suddenly support Littlefinger after his father's death, so once again a fake solution presented by Littlefinger. Benedal Belmore is the 5th Lord Declarant, and the first where Littlefinger actually presents a plausible solution. At first glance, he seems a fervent Littlefinger opposer. He was the first to arrive at the blockade of the Gates of the Moon. You could explain this by saying that the Eyrie and Strongsong aren't too far apart, though when looking at a geographical map, you would be proven wrong. The Belmores definitely have a farther path to march than the Waynwoods or the Redfords, and if Bronze John Royce started his march immediately, he would also be a likely contender for a first arriver. And yet, Benedal Belmore was the first to arrive. Benedal Belmore didn't take long to call his banners and march his entire army. It's likely that he already had his banners called, and maybe even his army marching, which just raises more questions. Who did he expect to attack? The Gates of the Moon? And if the meeting at Runestone set another target, would he really risk calling his banners over nothing? There are questions to be answered here, and right now I can only speculate about one thing. Benedal Belmore knew, before the meeting, that they'd march on the Gates of the Moon, something that the other Lords Declarant seemingly did not know. This means that Benedal Belmore was a trusted ally to Bronze John Royce, and thus probably a fervent Littlefinger opposer. Littlefinger claims that Benedal Belmore can be bought. We know way too little about him to definitely confirm or deny this fact, but we do get several hints in the Elaine sample chapter. Firstly, he actually comes to fight in the tourney, to possibly become one of the Winged Knights. This indicates that he's probably quite young. Will this be important? Who knows, but it's something interesting to keep in mind. Secondly, when Elaine meets him, he's speaking with Littlefinger about means to earn more profits from selling his food reserves. A lot of people have assumed that this means that Benedal Belmore is already bought. Still, I wouldn't be so sure. Just because he's taking advice from Littlefinger doesn't mean he has stopped opposing his rule. He could be doing it as an act to spy on Littlefinger, or he could just be taking advice from his enemy. We don't know enough about him to deny any of these possibilities. Thirdly, he seemed surprised when Elaine told him that Heir the Heir will participate in the tourney. Of course, this could once again be an act, but if it's not, it indicates that he was unaware of Lady Anya Waynwood's plans. This would quite obviously indicate that Anya Waynwood doesn't trust him, and I don't know what she has to gain from that. All she does is shun a possible ally while keeping something secret that everyone would know soon enough. It's weird, because keeping the secret doesn't seem to benefit her at all. So, on the one hand, it seems quite possible that Littlefinger has bought him, but on the other, it seems quite possible that this Littlefinger once again has lied, and that we as the audience are being fooled into believing Littlefinger has convinced him. There is one other piece of evidence surrounding Benedal Belmore, and we'll get back to it once we've discussed the corp race. The sixth of the Lords Declarant is Sir Simon Templeton, aka the Knight of 9 Stars. He is actually called Sir, which would lead you to believe he isn't head of his own house. He actually is head of his own house. The point being that they are not lords, they are landed knights. Landed knights are knights who are given their own land and their own keeps. The original Templeton, Lucian Templeton, was given this land in service of his battle of the 7 Stars. The Templetons have ruled from their seat, 9 Stars, for near 6,000 years, yet they are still knights, and not lords, which leads me to believe that the Templetons are not ambitious and very proud. Even though he is a landed knight, which commonly rule over a small piece of land, he brought 1,000 men to the Gates of the Moon, which shows that he actually has a lot more power than you'd expect from his title. Littlefinger is a lord, though the Baelish have only ever ruled a dozen families. It seems quite likely that the Templetons could have been made lords a long time ago, and yet in 6,000 years they haven't been made lords. The only explanation I can see for this is that they don't want to be made lords. Once again, not ambitious and very proud. Littlefinger claims to be able to defeat him by befriending him. This seems rather off though. Littlefinger doesn't have anything to offer the Templetons in exchange for their friendship. They are not ambitious and very proud, so what could Littlefinger possibly do to push them to his side? It seems that this was, once again, one of Littlefinger's lies. Now, don't get me wrong, this could be true, but with the information we have currently, the best conclusion is that this statement is false. Now that we're done with the Lords Declarant, let's discuss other minor lords and other minor points. To start, the corp race. Lionel Corbray, the Lord of Heartsholme, seems to be a Littlefinger supporter. He doesn't have a child and he didn't have a wife, so Littlefinger arranged his marriage with a merchant's daughter, who would give him children. In the Elaine sample chapter this is confirmed, where Lionel Corbray remains at home with his pregnant wife. This marriage was heavily shunned by Bronzejohn Royce, and everyone seems to believe that the Lords Declarant oppose this marriage. Yet, at the actual marriage, 3 of the Lords Declarant are present, seemingly supporting this marriage. Lady Anya Wainwood, Lord Benedar Belmore, and Sir Simon Templeton. This had led many to conclude that Lord Belmore and Sir Simon Templeton were already persuaded by Littlefinger. Still, I feel this conclusion is wrong, or at least jumping to this conclusion is wrong. It might be that Littlefinger persuaded the 2 of them, but I wouldn't use this as a piece of evidence for a said fact. Because there are other options for why these Lords Declarant would be present. Firstly, they might have been expecting that the visitors would be scheming against them. It would be a great excuse for possible Littlefinger supporters to come together unnoticed. Being present as Littlefinger opposers would make such scheming a lot harder. Not impossible, just harder. Secondly, maybe the Lords Declarant were invited by Lionel Corbray. Maybe he isn't the Littlefinger supporter that he seems to be, and he invited these Lords Declarant to discuss possible allegiances. If this were true, it could also pull in Corbray's loyalty into question, making things even more interesting. This is probably the most interesting option, though the least likely. Thirdly, they could have been present solely to give the impression of loyalty to Littlefinger. If Benedar Belmore's plan was to feign loyalty to Littlefinger, to possibly spy on him, then this was a perfect occasion for him to express this false loyalty. It gives Littlefinger the impression that he has Benedar Belmore under his control, though in reality things might not be so simple. Because maybe they were trying to convince someone else. Who I wouldn't know, but maybe this can be revealed to be part of some greater plan to convince someone of their loyalty. Then comes Lionel's younger brother, Sir Lyn Corbray. At the Battle of the Trident, their father was heavily wounded. While Lionel brought their father to safety, Lyn Corbray fought on. To reward this bravery, their father rewarded Lyn Corbray with the family sword, Lady Forlorn, but gave the rest to Lionel. It stands to reason that Lionel Corbray would believe that the sword should have been his, and if this was enough to spark a family feud, we do not know. Personally, I think it's rather unlikely because Lyn Corbray is homosexual. As his brother, Lionel would know this and could probably conclude that Lyn won't get any children, and thus the family sword would return to him or his children. Overall, I do expect that the Corbray brothers have common alliances, at least on base level. We do know one thing with near certainty though. Lyn Corbray is working for Littlefinger, at least as some agree. When the Lords Declarant came to parley at the Eyrie, he accompanies them, and during the parley he draws his sword. This allows Littlefinger to gain the upper hand and turn the parley to his favor. Mostly thanks to this, he is allowed a single year of rule. Later, Littlefinger confirms that Lyn Corbray is working for him, and for once I am inclined to actually believe him. Littlefinger tells Sansa that Lyn Corbray will be joining every plot he can against Littlefinger and then inform on them. In exchange for this, he will be rewarded with boys, gold, and silver. Some speculate that one of these promises would be Heartsholme, though I don't think that is the case. He is an homosexual man, and I don't expect he wants to get children. And without children, what's the point of getting Heartsholme? Littlefinger says he has simple pleasures, and I don't expect ruling to be one of them. But there is one more thing of interest with Lyn Corbray. His squire was a Redfort, which means that, if Lyn Corbray wanted, he could have handed over a Redfort hostage to Littlefinger. Such a hostage would be invaluable, and would probably put the Redforts out of the game. Still, instead of surrendering this hostage over to Littlefinger, he allows Bronzejohn Royce to organize a tourney to knight him. This only benefits the Lords Declarant, and if Lyn Corbray really was Littlefinger's true servant, he should never have allowed this. And yet, he does. This leads me to believe that there is more to Lyn Corbray than we as the audience expect. Maybe he isn't as loyal as he seems to be. Now to return to Benedar Belmore. I think this presents the most realistic option for his allegiance. Undecided. He wants to see what both sides can offer before he makes a choice. If it is true what Littlefinger says and the man is opportunistic, he will probably choose the option best for him. If he believes that Littlefinger can give him this, he will support Littlefinger. If he believes the Lords Declarant can give him this, he will support the Lords Declarant. But for now he feigns loyalty to both sides. He might be like Littlefinger during Ned's coup, waiting till the last minute to show his allegiance. Because let's go back to that moment. Ned Stark was used to politics in the north, where people keep their word and honor is crucial to being a good leader. Then in King's Landing he keeps this mentality. He expects that people have honor and keep their words. In other words, he was playing the wrong game. This is what gets him killed. Littlefinger, the one who betrayed him, didn't have any honor and didn't keep his word. Ned Stark needed to adapt to this new political situation, and yet he didn't, and he paid the price. I feel it would be really fitting if Littlefinger makes the same mistake. Littlefinger is used to the politics of King's Landing, where words are wind and loyalty situational. Then, when he comes to the Vale, he keeps this mentality, and that is what gets him killed. I'm not saying that this is exactly how things will play out in the Winds of Winter, but I do feel this would fit perfectly within a Game of Thrones. You win or you die, and you cannot win if you don't play the right game. Then we come back to Benedar Belmore. If he is just spying on Littlefinger and doesn't actually want to support him, no matter the situation, aka he doesn't play the same game as Littlefinger, I believe he could be one way this prediction could come to fruition. Of course, there are many ways to skin a cat, but this is one of them. Littlefinger could trust Benedar Belmore because he expects his loyalties to be situational, and he thinks that he's bought Benedar Belmore to his side. Still, when all is said and done, it could be revealed that Benedar Belmore had been spying on him all along. Personally, I don't think this is going to happen. Benedar Belmore has played a way too insignificant part in the story for him to be revealed this way. But who knows, this is but one way Littlefinger's story can be resolved. And if George R. R. Martin takes the time to build up to this, it could happen. Though, to make things clear, it is extremely unlikely. Then we finally come to the most important external character in the Vale, Harold Harding, aka Harry the Heir. The reason I haven't spoken of him yet is because I'm going to discuss him a lot more thoroughly in my Elaine video, but to keep things short, he is the heir of the Vale. If Robert Arryn is to die, he will inherit the Arryn title and the Arryn lands, thus he is an invaluable asset to whomever controls him. Currently this is Anya Waynwood, who holds him as her ward. Because Harry isn't of age yet, she can make all her decisions for him. Most importantly, she can decide who he marries. Because his marriage is, of course, really important. He is probably going to be the future Lord of the Vale, which means anyone he marries will be the future Lady of the Vale. But he is already betrothed to Elaine Stone of all people. Now you might be sitting here wondering why Anya Waynwood would ever make such a stupid decision. It marries one of the most powerful people in the realm to a bastard, and it gives a lot of control to Littlefinger. If this ever comes to pass, Harry the Heir probably wouldn't appreciate it, because realistically marrying a bastard for him would be taking the short end of the stick on all possible ways. It would be better for him to marry, say, Marjorie Tyrell and gain an alliance with the Reach. Of course he won't marry her, but you get my point. Marrying a bastard seems ridiculous, especially because Harry has shown a disdain for a bastard in the sample chapter. But Anya Waynwood isn't truly the fool here. She added a clause to the marriage. Harry the Heir has to agree to it himself. This causes a lot of complications. Firstly, Harry the Heir is really arrogant and proud. He is not the type of person to ever accept a marriage to a bastard, probably deeming that far below him. Secondly, Harry the Heir can be manipulated by his host to either accept or decline this offer. As long as Harry the Heir is Anya Waynwood's ward, we can be pretty sure he will decline, but if Harry were to become a ward of Littlefinger, we can be pretty sure he will accept. If at least that is what Littlefinger wants, and we'll get back to that in another video. Thirdly, Harry the Heir is already in a relationship. Though he might not be the kindest person, I don't expect he'll suddenly dump his girlfriend out of nowhere. But once again, we'll come back to this. To solve all this, Littlefinger tells Sansa he plans on revealing her identity so she can marry Harry the Heir as Sansa Stark. The problem is that this marriage pact specifically states Elaine Stone. If it is revealed that she's actually Sansa Stark, the entire marriage pact would fall apart. Let's assume it was the other way around. You expect to marry one of the highest ladies of Westeros, but instead you marry some crofter's daughter. Of course that wouldn't work that way, so the entire idea of revealing her identity and him accepting is truly ridiculous, especially because revealing her identity would reveal she's already married, so we know the marriage couldn't go through either way. Littlefinger does have one thing going for him though. Heir the Heir is just the worst. Let me explain. Heir the Heir had his first real relationship with a girl named Sissy. He even got her with a child, Alice Stone. But after childbirth, he didn't like the look of her anymore, so he dumped her and went to his next girlfriend, Saffron. She is the daughter of some spice merchant from Gold Isle, and once again, good looking and, by now, pregnant. This reveals three important things about Heir the Heir. Firstly, he chooses his girlfriend based on appearance. Secondly, he is willing to dump his girlfriend if he finds someone who looks better. Thirdly, he has zero empathy for women, even the women he sleeps with. These 3 points combined mean that if it could happen, that Heir the Heir could decide that Elaine is more beautiful than Saffron, and thus that he would maybe want to marry Elaine, or at least bed her. But all of this will come back in the Elaine video, as established. Now there are two more things I want to mention. As established in the beginning, we're building up towards a tourney, and a house will probably be quite important in the tourney is House Sunderland. The Sunderlands are the leaders of the Three Sisters, 3 islands in the Bight. Because they lie somewhere in between the Vale and the north, both sides have often fought over them. Even now, the Three Sisters are only part of the Vale in name, but they mostly rule themselves. The Sistermen, the people from the Three Sisters, are known for having webs between their hands and feet and being terrible riders. So, by all accounts, the 3 Sunderland brothers heading to the tourney should be terrible riders. This is probably false though, which will definitely lead to interesting situations at the tourney. When Davos Seaworth stranded on Sweet Sister in A Dance with Dragons, he heard that Tristan Sunderland, the leader of the Sunderlands, had bought expensive destriers so his 7 sons could become knights. Thus, these Sunderland brothers have been training for quite a while, even with the ambition of one day becoming a knight. In the Elaine sample chapter, we read that these brothers don't have the mark, and thus wouldn't be restrained on that hand. So, it's quite likely that these Sunderland brothers are not the trash at writing people expect them to be. They are probably quite decent, if not good. Which, as said, could lead to some interesting situations. But that is for a future video. One more thing though. We know that House Sunderland is in debt due to these expenses. It is quite reasonable to expect that Littlefinger would have bought them out of their debt now that the Iron Bank has called back theirs. This would mean that Littlefinger would hold substantial power over them. Because we don't know enough about the Sunderlands, I will note them as loyal to Littlefinger, though you should take that with a grain of salt. Now we have discussed most of the major houses, but there are of course a lot of minor houses, and this is the entire list of them. I expect the following 9 houses are supportive of Littlefinger. House Arryn of the Eyrie, House Arryn of Goldtown, House Baelish of the Fingers, House Corbraveheart's Home, House Egan, House Grafton of Goldtown, House Linderley of Snakewood, House Moore, House Sunderland of the Three Sisters. I expect the following 15 houses are indifferent to Littlefinger. House Burrell of Breakwater, House Crane, House Doniger, House Dutton, House Elisham of the Paps, House Hersey of Newkeep, House Lips, House Longthorpe of Little Sister, House Malcolm of Old Anchor, House Pryor of Pebble, House Ruthermort, House Torrent of Little Sister, House Upcliff of Witch Isle, House Woodall from the Paps, House Whitman. I expect the following 11 houses to be opposing Littlefinger. House Belmore of Strongstong, House Coldwater of Coldwater Burn, House Hardane, House Hunter of Longbow Hall, House Redfort of Redfort, House Royce of Runestone, House Shet of Goldtown, House Shet of Goldtower, House Templeton of Nine Stars, House Tillett of Grey Glen, House Waynwood of Iron Oaks. To make things clear, we have heard nothing of House Crane and House Dalton, which is why I placed them in neutral, but they might be extinct for all we know. So to put this all into a fancy diagram, voila, all the houses for, neutral or against Littlefinger. There are two houses I'm ignoring here, which are House Royce of the Gates of the Moon, but we'll get back to them in the next video, and House Waxley of Wickenden, because they seem to follow House Royce of the Gates of the Moon. Hello everyone, I can't thank you enough for watching this video. I really appreciate it, especially if you've watched all the way to the end. I've spent a lot of time making this video, and the reason this video is so incredibly long is because I want to get everything established so I can actually start making prophecy and writing videos. I'm just really excited to actually start writing the book. And after I finish the starting sprint, I will aim for making videos around 10-minute mark. Both because that's a lot less stress for me, and it makes things a lot easier to consume for you. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like. If you didn't enjoy this video, feel free to leave a dislike. If you disagreed with me, feel free to leave a comment explaining why I am wrong. If you want to see more, feel free to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.